How's it going, guys? Today is April 15th, 2:24 p.m. here on the East Coast. I hope to be doing a vlog at a different coast later on this month. Not a different coast, but maybe a different time zone. That would be interesting to change it up. So this vlog is going to be titled "It's Okay to Say No." There's been a couple different times in my life, and I had a recent event yesterday where I kind of was. It would have been nice to say yes, and it probably would have benefited me by giving me the day off because I had my brother wanted to work a Sunday, and but I just didn't want to miss the opportunity to work because I'm already missing a couple days of work at the end of the month. So my wife is like, "Why don't you take the day off? Maybe he could use the money," and I told her maybe we could use the money. But it would have been nice to have the day off, and I definitely need the time now more than ever. I'm running into a bit of a crunch time where I have to finish up two classes and or finish up a couple classes, and then I still have to build my daughter's bed before I take off in 12 days. So I've got a lot of work to get done, and I plan on starting to hunker down and get that stuff done within the upcoming weeks. So, with that being said, it's okay to say no to some things if they happen to um, interfere, or if you just feel like saying no because you have your own reasoning. I notice a lot of people most of the time will say yes, and then they'll be like upset, and they'll even use that type of tone where it's like yes, and you can tell they're not excited about saying yes. But why do that? Why put yourself through the misery or the unhappiness when you can just say no to certain things that might bring you unhappiness? Of course, if the question does bring you happiness and the yes is, more happy than saying no, then absolutely say yes. But it is okay to say no at times whenever people ask you to do things or ask you questions or try to. Most of the time, it has to do with doing things, but it is okay to say no, and you have to take your best interest at heart, or your children's best interest at heart as well, or your family's sometimes. And I'll give you an example of that. So there was a couple times during the course of both of my marriages where I noticed that my wives were attached to their families as a normal person should be. And sometimes they would ask to go visit their families if we lived in a different state. Like my wife wanted to go visit her mom, and we also had to pick up our daughter. And before, my ex-wife would ask to go visit her family in when we lived in Texas, and she would want to come back home to Florida. And sometimes I would have to sacrifice and say no because I just couldn't take the time off from work. Or now in a particular circumstance when you're not, at least when I was in the military, I would try to save up my time off. So I would try to plan things accordingly, maybe on 4 days, because roughly once a month you get a 4 days off in a row in the military. Yeah, it sounds pretty nice, and it is pretty nice, but I think it's deserving, after you take into consideration the hours you work on a daily basis when you have to leave your house by probably no later than 6 o'clock in the morning, and you're not home until an average day, probably 5:30 p.m. So it's almost a 12-hour day every day. So when you take those hours into consideration, I think they do deserve a couple extra days off during the month because they're just putting more hours in than the average person per week, and that's not including any other additional duties that you might do. But with that being said, I had they would my wives would want to go visit their families, and I just would say, we either didn't have the money for all of us to go, so they could go, and I would stay home and take care of some other things. But the really big factor to that is that I noticed in the civilian side of the coin now. And when I say civilian side of the coin, I mean outside of the military, is that when I miss work now, and if you don't have paid time off accrued, and some jobs just don't offer that, like mine doesn't, my wife's does, But if you don't have that accrued, then you're just missing out on the pay that you could have received on top of what it costs to get you there and the money you're going to be spending there. I mean, it really takes a toll on you. And I think that a lot of people don't take that into consideration when booking trips. And it really takes a huge amount of money to be able to make a trip, more than a couple days, be successful. And I was just thinking about it, and like what we paid for me and my wife to both go on a cruise, and it was about the same as just the plane tickets to just go to Arizona, where we're going to be going to at the end of the month. And that's no food included in Arizona, no um, particular like hotel we're staying at. We're staying with family to try and save some money. So, excuse me. If you take all those things into consideration, I mean, probably could have a much nicer trip, for probably a lot cheaper and food included and a lot of other things. But it still doesn't satisfy the need that my wife has to want to go to Arizona to visit her mom and see her mom and things of that nature. It was either that or fly her mom out. Either way, somebody's missing out on some work money. So there were several times where I would tell my wives that go ahead and go. I can't necessarily take the time off, or we can't afford to send both of us. So why do you guys go? And I would just say no, that I wouldn't go. And that's one of those times where you just have to kind of weigh things out. And I'm a very logical, thinking type of person. I weigh the consequences versus the benefits, and I just make a decision. And if the decision is not in my favor, then I say no. But that doesn't mean that it can't be in their favor. So if they want to go, I make things as clear as possible as to obviously the amount of, just say the plane ticket to get to where you need to go. On top of the work you're going to be missing unless you have paid time off benefits, which don't exist in every job. And then the time you're going to be spending there, and the money you're going to be spending there. It's probably going to be more than what you're spending at home. So all those things into consideration, sometimes we can afford to send both of us. And I was okay with that. You know, I got to see my family when I got to see them. But I remember when I was exiting the military, I had a little over 60 days of accrued leave, which means I didn't take a day off for roughly 2 years. You average about 30 days a year in the military. So that means I didn't take a little over 2 years. I didn't take a day off for a little over 2 years over the course of 8 years. And I was pretty proud of that. There was people who had much more time off or accrued leave than me, but every year at the end of October they recycle you back down to 60 or whatever it was. I think it was down to 60. So if you didn't take the leave, you lose it. It was called the use or lose leave, if it came down to that. And so I just found that kind of interesting and kind of something that that I was really proud of, and it afforded me to take 2 months off the military, and I was still being paid. And that time was I didn't take for granted. I used it to find another job, apply for school, get into a university, select classes, and start and do all these other different things that I was doing at that time. I didn't really take 2 months off, but it is okay. And to tie back to the original talk, it is okay to say no sometimes. You just have to weigh your balance your pros and cons. And I tend to do that a lot, and I started doing it at a young age. And if you don't find things are beneficial for you as simple as making a simple decision as to what you're going to do today, then don't do it. Or if you're trying to do things to please other people and it just doesn't have any effect or bearing on you, then it's okay to say no. So that's the gist I want to leave you for with that for this vlog. And I hope you guys found the stories pretty interesting, but it's how I think that people can relate best is when I tell stories about my experiences. And then you guys can see, that me saying no was for the overall well-being of everybody. And to me, it was a win-win. We can't necessarily all go together to take these trips all the time, but they had more of a urge and a need to be met whenever it did come to visiting their family. The time apart took more of a toll on them than it did on me. I was just groomed differently, and whenever I got used to military life, it would become easy. I would see my family, or I would fly them up. That wasn't uncommon. I remember I helped my brothers find their way to Colorado when I was there, and even my uncle came down on his own dime, but he did end up coming down. We did spend some time together, and that's another thing. It required me not to take the time off. A little bit more of an investment to get them there, but I wasn't necessarily missing any work because of it. And that's there's different avenues, different approaches you can take, and different solutions for all types of problems. If you just think about the problem critically, and think about the best outcomes and think about several different outcomes, you'll piece together something that makes the most sense and benefits everybody the most, including yourself. And if you encounter a couple no's to get there, then so be it. Don't be afraid to say no. And if you are not particularly happy with the decision. So that'll be it for today's vlog. I appreciate you guys watching, liking, commenting, subscribing, all of the above. I believe I'm still gonna check here. I believe I'm still at 60 subscribers. Kind of a huge slowdown here from 59 and 60. It was just kind of dwindling. Still trying to reach 75 by the end of the month. Got about 15 to 16 days to do it, but I do believe I can get there. And I will continue posting vlogs even when I am out of town. I don't know if I'll be able to post them per se, but I will be recording them. I don't need necessarily a signal to record them, but I will be posting them as soon as I get a chance to. So again, I appreciate you guys watching, and I'll see you on the next one.